Do you know what happens when someone tries to take control of my money without my permission? I looked straight into my son's eyes. Tell your wife to stop digging into my finances. She has no right to my savings, my house, or anything I built. If she crosses that line one more time, I won't stay silent anymore. Do you understand? My son's face turned pale as his wife slowly realized I was not the helpless father they thought I was. I'm truly thankful to each of you for being here with Dad's revenge stories. Where in the world are you watching today? Drop your town, city, or country down below. Quick note. This narrative incorporates fictional elements designed for drama and educational reflection. Any similarity to actual names or places is purely coincidental, yet the message conveyed carries powerful meaning. The drive to Marcus's house takes 22 minutes on a good night. I know because I have made it dozens of times over the years, first, when he and Serena were newlyweds, then less frequently as the years stacked up and the invitations grew sparse. Tonight the road is quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes to central Ohio in September, when summer finally loosens its grip and the air turns thin and honest. I have a bottle of Burgundy on the passenger seat, the good kind, the kind I save for occasions that deserve it. 6 months without a dinner invitation felt like an occasion worth marking. I work at Hargrove and Sons Funeral Home on Clement Avenue. I have worked there for 11 years since the year after Carol passed. People in the neighborhood know me as the man who handles the paperwork and the preparation rooms, the one who comes in before dawn and leaves after dark, the one who does the work nobody wants to think too hard about. They are not wrong about any of that. What they do not know, what almost nobody knows, is what I did for 35 years before I ever set foot in that building. I let them not know. It suits me fine. Marcus met me at the door with a handshake instead of a hug, which told me something before I even crossed the threshold. He is 40 years old, and still handsome in the way that makes people trust him before he has earned it. He took the wine, said it looked great, and set it on the hallway table without opening it. Serena appeared from the kitchen wearing an apron she had clearly just put on her dark hair, pinned back her smile, the kind that arrives fully assembled. "Waikoki," she said, pressing her cheek briefly against mine. "You look thin. Are you eating enough over at that place?" "That place feeds me fine, Mo," I said. The dining room smelled like pot roast and candle wax. The table was set with the good plates, the ones Carol would have recognized as wedding gifts from another era. I noticed the centerpiece was new white flowers I did not know the name of, arranged with the precision of someone who had watched a YouTube tutorial that morning. Everything was slightly too correct, the way a room looks when someone has been preparing it for an audience rather than a meal. We sat down. Marcus poured water and talked about the drive, about traffic on I-270, about a documentary he had been watching. His voice had the careful rhythm of a man reading from notes he had memorized earlier in the day. I ate my pot roast and listened and kept my own counsel. It was Serena who changed the temperature of the room. She does it the way certain people do not, with volume, but with direction. She waited until Marcus had refilled my water glass, waited until I had taken another bite, and then she turned to me with her chin resting lightly on her folded hands. "Ray, I have to ask, working at a funeral home for over a decade, you must have a decent pension situation by now, right? I mean, between that and Social Security." Her voice was warm, curious, the tone of someone asking about the weather. My fork did not stop moving. "I get by," I said. "No. But I mean, what does something like that actually pay? Because Marcus and I were just talking the other night about retirement planning, and we realized we don't really know what your situation looks like." She laughed lightly, the laugh of a woman who has practiced making serious questions sound like small talk. "Family should know these things." Marcus stared at his plate. His jaw had tightened in a way I recognized from when he was 12 years old and had done something he knew was wrong and was waiting to find out if I knew it too. "I have what I need," I said. Serena tilted her head undeterred. Do you have much in savings? Because housing prices in this area, your place on Dunmore Street, must be worth quite a bit now. Have you thought about what happens to it eventually? There it was. Not the question itself, but the cluster of questions: savings, property value, eventual disposition, arranged together like instruments tuning before a performance. I have spent 35 years listening to the way people organize their words when they want something they have not yet said out loud. The organization here was not subtle. These aren't really dinner topics, Serena, I said, and kept my voice the same temperature it had been all evening. She laughed again and reached across to touch Marcus's arm. He's right. I'm being nosy. It's just Marcus has been working so hard on the business expansion, and we've been thinking about the future and... She let the sentence trail off with a small, helpless gesture that was anything but helpless. Marcus finally looked up from his plate. His eyes met mine for exactly 1 second before sliding away toward the centerpiece. In that 1 second, I saw the faint heat of guilt in a man who had known this conversation was coming and had decided to let it happen anyway. I took a slow sip of water. I thought about Carol, who used to say that the truth has a smell like weather before it turns. She was never wrong about that. This pot roast is excellent, I said. Serena smiled and said thank you. Marcus said nothing. The candles burned steadily in the center of the table, and the white flowers I did not know the name of stood very straight in their arrangement, and the evening continued forward in the way that evenings do when everyone at the table is pretending the last 5 minutes did not happen. But I noticed everything. I always do. It is not a skill I chose. It is simply what 35 years of looking at things other people prefer not to look at will do to a man. When I left 2 hours later, Marcus walked me to my car. He shook my hand again at the door of my truck, held it a beat longer than necessary, and said, "Good to see you, Dad." His voice cracked slightly on the last word, the way it used to when he was telling me something true he wished were not true. "Good to see you too, son," I said. I drove home on the same road I had driven in on, past the same fields and the same gas stations, and the same patient darkness of an Ohio September night. On the passenger seat, the bottle of Burgundy sat where I had left it unopened, because Serena had served her own wine at dinner, and nobody had mentioned mine again. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the truck for a while with the engine off. The house was dark, the way it has been dark for 11 years. Not empty exactly, but quieter than a house should be. I opened the glove compartment and took out the small notebook I keep there, the one with the black cover and the worn spiral binding a habit from another life that I have never quite managed to put down. I opened it to the first blank page. I wrote the date. I wrote one line beneath it: "Something is coming." Then I clicked off the small overhead light and went inside. I did not sleep well that night. Not because I was afraid. Fear has never been the thing that keeps me awake, but because my mind works the way it always has, like a machine that does not know how to idle. I lay on top of the covers in the dark and stared at the ceiling and let the evening run back through me slowly, the way you rewind a recording to find the exact frame where something went wrong. It was the number that kept stopping me. Serena had mentioned it casually tucked inside a longer sentence about retirement planning and property values in the neighborhood. She had said something like, "With what you probably have set aside. And I'm just guessing here, somewhere in the neighborhood of 300,000 or so, you must feel pretty secure." She had smiled when she said it. She had said, "I'm just guessing," the way people say "no offense" as a disclaimer that protects nobody. $340,000. That is what I have in my savings account at First Central Bank of Ohio. Not 300,000. Not 350. 340. The number Serena offered up at the dinner table, framed as an offhand estimate, sat within $40,000 of the precise truth. People do not guess that accurately. Not without help. I sat up at 2 in the morning and put my feet on the cold floor and thought about who had helped her. The answer did not take long to arrive. It never does when you already know it, and have simply been giving yourself permission not to say it yet. 6 weeks earlier, Marcus had called asking if I needed anything from the pharmacy. I told him no, but I asked if he could grab my mail on his way past. I had been expecting a document from the county assessor's office regarding the property value update on the Dunmore Street house. Marcus had a spare key. He let himself in, collected the mail, left it on the kitchen table. I had thanked him the next day without thinking twice about it. The assessor's document listed the current estimated market value of my home at $520,000. My most recent bank statement, which had also arrived that week, sat in the same stack of envelopes on that kitchen table. I thought about Marcus standing in my kitchen alone, the stack of mail in his hands. I thought about what a man who is worried about money might do when he finds himself holding his father's financial documents with nobody watching. I did not want to think it. I thought it anyway. In 35 years of working for the federal government, I learned that the most painful conclusions are not the ones that surprise you. They are the ones you saw coming from a long way off and spent considerable energy trying not to reach. I made coffee at 5:30 in the morning and stood at the kitchen window while the sun came up, gray and slow, over the back fence. Carol's rose bushes were still out there, dormant now. The canes cut back the way she had always insisted they be cut back before the first frost. I had learned to do it the way she showed me. Some things you keep doing not because you have to, but because stopping feels like losing something you cannot afford to lose. By the time I drove to Hargrove and Sons that morning, I had made a decision. Not about what to do, not yet, but about how to think about it. I had spent too many years watching people react to difficult information before they had finished understanding it. Reaction without understanding is just noise. I was not interested in making noise. Owen Briggs was already in the back when I arrived, reviewing the schedule for the week. Owen is 52 and has worked at Hargrove for 9 years, a compact, careful man who spent his 20s as a sheriff's deputy in Muskingum County before a knee injury changed the direction of his life. He is the only person in my current life who knows what my previous life looked like. We have an understanding that does not require much maintenance. He looked up when I came in and read my face the way people who pay attention read faces. "Bad weekend," he said. "Informative," I said. He nodded and went back to the schedule. That is the thing about Owen. He knows the difference between a man who wants to talk and a man who is still thinking, and he has never once confused the two. I worked through the morning. Around noon, I stepped outside to the small concrete landing behind the building where Owen and I sometimes ate lunch when the weather allowed. I sat on the metal folding chair and opened my notebook and wrote down everything I remembered about Serena's number, the exact phrasing she had used, the context, the smile, the way Marcus had looked at his plate in the half-second before she said it. Then I wrote down the only question that mattered: who told her? Beneath it, I wrote the answer I had been avoiding since 2 in the morning. Marcus did. The question is whether he knew what he was doing when he did it. I stared at that line for a long time. The parking lot behind Hargrove was quiet, just the sound of a delivery truck on Clement Avenue, and somewhere down the block, a dog announcing its feelings to the neighborhood. I thought about my son at 40 years old, with his careful handshake and his wife's prepared smile, and his eyes that had slid away from mine across that dinner table like a stone skipping across water. I thought about whether I was angry. I checked carefully the way you check a wound to understand its depth before you decide how to treat it. What I found was not anger exactly. It was something heavier and more specific, The particular weight of a man who has been underestimated by someone he loved without reservation. I closed the notebook. I went back inside and finished the afternoon and drove home the long way past the high school where Marcus had played baseball, past the Dairy Queen where we used to stop after his games, past the turn that used to lead to Carol's mother's house before that whole block was redeveloped into a strip mall selling things nobody needed. At home, I opened the kitchen drawer, where I keep the small things that matter, the spare key to the safe deposit box, the card for my attorney, the folded paper with Owen's personal cell number written in ink that had started to fade. I added a new item to that drawer, the notebook open to the page I had written that afternoon. Then I picked up my phone and called Marcus. He answered on the third ring, his voice carrying the particular brightness of a man who has been waiting for a call he is not sure he wants to receive. "Dad," he said. "Hey." "Marcus," I said. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me straight." A pause. Brief, but I have built a career on brief pauses. His breath shifted just slightly, just enough. "Sure," he said. "Of course. What's up?" "The mail you picked up from my house 6 weeks ago," I said. "Did you look at it before you left it on the table?" The silence that followed lasted 4 full seconds. I counted. "I just grabbed it from the box, Dad," he said finally. "I didn't really look at it." He said it the way people say things that are not quite true. Not with anger, not with confidence, but with the exhausted carefulness of a man trying to hold a shape that has already started to collapse. "Okay," I said. "Good night, Marcus." I hung up. I stood in my kitchen in the quiet of a September evening and felt something settle inside my chest. Not peace, but clarity. The cold, functional clarity of a man who now knows exactly what he is dealing with and has begun very quietly to decide what to do about it. I opened the notebook to a fresh page. I wrote one line. Marcus knew. The knock came at 8:15 on a Saturday morning, 3 sharp raps that I recognized before I even reached the door. Dot Mercer has been knocking on doors the same way for as long as I have known her, purposeful, unhurried the knock of a woman who has something to say and has already decided she is going to say it. She was standing on my porch in her yellow cardigan with a loaf of banana bread wrapped in foil and an expression on her face that told me the banana bread was not the reason she had come. "Ray," she said. "You got a minute?" "I've got all morning," I said, and held the door open. Dot Mercer has lived next door to this house for 31 years. She was Carol's closest friend in the neighborhood, the kind of friend who shows up without calling, who knows where you keep the extra coffee filters and which drawer sticks in the summer humidity. After Carol passed, Dot became something different for me. Not a replacement for anything. Just a presence that understood what the house used to sound like and never pretended otherwise. She is 68 years old and sharper than most people half her age, and she has never once told me something I did not need to hear. She sat at the kitchen table while I poured the coffee, and she set the banana bread between us, and she folded her hands on the tabletop, the way she does when she is organizing her thoughts into the right order. "Serena came to see me," she said. "About 2 weeks ago. I should have called you sooner, but I kept thinking maybe I was reading it wrong." She pressed her lips together briefly. "I wasn't reading it wrong." I set a mug in front of her and sat down across the table. "Tell me what happened," I said. Dot looked at me steadily. "She came over on a Tuesday afternoon. Said she was in the neighborhood, wanted to say hello. You know, I've always tried to be polite to her, Ray, even when well." She wrapped both hands around the mug. "She asked me how you were doing, whether I thought you seemed well. And then she started asking other things." "What kind of other things?" "Your finances. Dot said it plainly without softening it. She asked whether I knew if you had a will, whether I knew who you trusted with your personal business. She asked about the house, what I thought it might be worth, whether I knew if you had a mortgage still on it. Dot's jaw tightened. I told her I didn't make it a habit to know my neighbor's financial details, and that she ought to ask you directly if she had questions. She laughed, like I had said something charming, and changed the subject. I kept my hands flat on the table and my face the way I have learned to keep it when I am receiving information I intend to act on later. Is that all? I asked. Dot hesitated. The hesitation told me it was not all. She also asked me for money, Dot said. Her voice carried the particular discomfort of a person reporting something they are still slightly embarrassed to have believed even briefly. She said you had asked her to reach out to a few neighbors, people you trusted, because Marcus was going through a rough patch with the business, and you wanted to help him quietly without making a fuss. She said you were too proud to ask directly, and that you had specifically mentioned my name. Dot looked up at me. She asked me for $3,000, said you would pay it back within the month. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, a car moved slowly down Dunmore Street, its tires making a soft sound on the pavement that had just been resurfaced the previous spring. I didn't ask her to do that, Dot, I said. I know that now, she said. I knew it then too, if I'm honest with myself. But she said it so smoothly, Ray. Like it was already settled, like she was just filling in the last administrative detail. Dot's voice tightened, and her knuckles whitened around the mug. I told her I would have to think about it. And then I thought about it, and the more I thought about it, the worse it felt. And I should have called you that same day, but I kept telling myself I must have misunderstood. You didn't misunderstand anything, I said. Did she go to anyone else? I asked. Dot set her mug down carefully. I talked to Helen Henderson on Thursday. She got the same visit, the same story. Helen gave her $1,500. And Paul Greer at the end of the block, I don't know the exact amount, but he mentioned Serena had stopped by. Dot looked at me with something in her expression that mixed anger with an apology she did not owe me. Ray, I'm sorry. I should have picked up the phone the same day. I reached across the table and put my hand briefly over hers. You came now, I said. That's what matters. She looked at me the way Carol used to look at me when she suspected I was being braver than I actually felt. What are you going to do? She asked. I'm going to find out how wide this is, I said. And then I'm going to decide. Dot nodded slowly. She understood, I think, that what I meant by decide was not what most people mean when they use that word. She had known me long enough to understand that when I make a decision, it arrives fully formed and does not require revision. We sat together for another half hour. We ate the banana bread, which was very good, and we talked about other things, the neighbor's new dog, the oak tree at the end of the block that the city had finally agreed to trim. The ordinary texture of a Saturday morning in a neighborhood where people still knew each other's names. When Dot stood to leave, she paused at the kitchen doorway and turned back. She talked about your job, she said, about the funeral home. She called it. Dot stopped, and something moved through her expression. She called it morbid and beneath you. Said she never understood why a man your age would choose to spend his time that way. I looked at Dot for a moment. Then I said, she doesn't know what I spend my time doing. Dot studied me for just a second longer than usual. No, she said quietly. I don't think she does. After she left, I stood at the kitchen sink and looked out at Carol's rose bushes for a long time. Then I dried my hands on the dish towel, picked up my phone, and called Owen Briggs. He answered on the second ring. Owen, I said. Tonight, if you're free, I need to talk through something with somebody who understands how these things work. A brief pause. Then I'll bring the coffee, Owen said. You bring the notebook. Hargrove and Sons closes at 6 on Saturdays, but the back door stays unlocked until Owen leaves, and Owen rarely leaves before 8. I have always appreciated that about him, the way he treats the building not as a place of employment, but as a place of purpose, the way certain people treat churches or libraries or workshops, where serious things get done quietly and without ceremony. He had the coffee already made when I arrived. 2 mugs on the small folding table between the 2 chairs we keep in the back room. The room that smells like Murphy oil soap and old wood, and the particular kind of stillness that settles into spaces where people come to say goodbye. It is not a sad smell to me. It stopped being sad a long time ago. Now it just smells like honesty. Start from the beginning, Owen said, handing me a mug. So I did. I told him about the dinner invitation, about Serena's questions about the number she should not have known. I told him about Marcus picking up my mail, about the bank statement sitting on the kitchen table for anyone with a spare key and a moment alone to read. I told him about Dot, about Helen Henderson, about Paul Greer at the end of the block, who had apparently handed over money he could not easily spare, because a woman had come to his door wearing concern like a well-fitted coat and speaking in the name of a neighbor he trusted. Owen listened the way he always listens, completely, without interrupting, without the small sounds of agreement that most people use to signal they are following along. He just listened, and when I finished, he was quiet for a moment, turning his mug slowly in his hands. How much do you think they actually know about what you used to do? He asked. Nothing, I said. As far as Marcus is concerned, I spent my career pushing paper for a federal contractor and retired with a decent pension. That is what I told him when he was growing up, and I had good reasons for telling him that, and those reasons have not changed. Owen nodded. He knew the reasons. He is the only person in my current life who does. When I came to Hargrove 11 years ago, a few months after Carol passed, I gave Warren Hargrove a version of my employment history that was accurate in all the ways that mattered for the job and vague in all the ways that protected people who needed protecting. Owen had been working there for 2 years by then. It took him about 6 weeks to figure out that I was not exactly what I had presented myself as being, and another 2 weeks to decide it did not change anything about how he felt about working alongside me. He has never told anyone, not once in 11 years. So they think they're dealing with a 65-year-old funeral home employee with a savings account and a paid-off house, Owen said. That's correct. He almost smiled. That's a significant miscalculation on their part. It is, I agreed. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and took out the notebook. I opened it to the page where I had written the list that morning. Not the page that said Marcus knew, but the next one, the one where I had begun organizing what I understood and what I still needed to find out. I laid it flat on the table between us. Owen leaned forward and read it without touching it, the way he had learned to handle documents from watching me. When he finished, he sat back and rubbed the side of his jaw with 2 fingers. You need to see the full picture before you move, he said. It was not a question. If I confront them now, they'll close the doors I haven't opened yet, I said. There's more here than a loan request and some borrowed money from the neighbors. I can feel the shape of it. I just can't see all the edges. What do you need from me? I told him. I needed access to the reference materials I had brought with me when I came to Hargrove, a locked filing cabinet in the storage room that Warren Hargrove had never asked about because I had given him no reason to. Inside it were the tools of a trade I had nominally retired from: document analysis guides, handwriting comparison references, a portable scanner, and a set of files I had kept. because experience had taught me that the past has a tendency to become relevant again when you least expect it. Owen got up without a word, went to the storage room and came back 3 minutes later carrying the cabinet key on a ring I had not seen in 2 years. He set it on the table in front of me. "Anything else?" he said. "One more thing," I said. "If anyone asks, and I don't expect they will, but if they do, I've been here all evening reviewing next week's arrangements." Owen picked up his mug. "That's exactly what you've been doing," he said. We sat together for another hour after that. I unlocked the cabinet and took stock of what was inside, checking that everything was where it should be, that nothing had deteriorated in the time it had been sitting untouched in the back of a funeral home in central Ohio. Everything was exactly as I had left it. I am a careful man about the things that matter. At one point, Owen asked the question I had been waiting for him to ask, the one I had been asking myself since 2 o'clock that morning. "Do you think Marcus knows everything his wife is doing?" he said. "Or is he just the one holding this door open while she walks through it?" I looked at the notebook on the table between us, at the page where I had written Marcus knew and meant it, at the question beneath it that I had not yet been able to answer cleanly. "I think," I said slowly, "that Marcus is a man who has told himself a story about what he's doing and why. Whether that story makes him guilty or just weak, I don't know yet." Owen looked at me steadily. "Does it matter for what you're planning?" I closed the notebook and slid it back into my jacket pocket. "It matters for what comes after," I said. Owen accepted that without argument. Outside, the October night had settled fully over Clement Avenue, and the parking lot behind Hargrove was dark and quiet. And inside the back room, the two of us sat with our cooling coffee in the particular comfortable silence of men who have worked alongside each other long enough to trust the spaces between their words. I drove home at 9:30 with the cabinet key in my pocket and the notebook against my chest, and a plan that was not yet a plan, but was becoming one the way weather becomes weather, gradually, then all at once. Marcus called on a Sunday morning while I was drinking my second cup of coffee and reading the weather report in the Columbus Dispatch. He said he wanted to catch up, just the two of us, maybe grab coffee at the house. His voice had that particular brightness I had come to recognize over the past weeks. The brightness of a man performing casualness, the way an actor holds a prop that is supposed to look natural, but is held just slightly too deliberately. "Sure," I said. "What time?" "Maybe around 2. Serena will be home too, if that's okay." There it was. Just the two of us had become 3 before the sentence was finished. I told him 2 o'clock was fine and hung up and sat for a moment looking at the weather report without reading it. The forecast said rain by Tuesday. I believed it. I arrived at their house on Kettering Drive at 2 o'clock exactly. Serena answered the door in a cream-colored blouse, her hair down, her smile already in position. The living room had been arranged with the same careful deliberateness as the dining room. 3 weeks earlier, throw pillows, straightened magazines fanned on the coffee table, a plate of store-bought cookies set out on a tray that suggested hospitality without requiring much effort. Marcus was already seated on the couch, his knee moving up and down in the small, rhythmic way it does when he is nervous and trying not to show it. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing in particular. Marcus asked about work. I told him it was steady. Serena brought out coffee in the good mugs and asked if I took cream, which she already knew the answer to after 11 years of being my daughter-in-law. I said black as always, and watched her pour with the precise attentiveness of someone who needed the task to occupy her hands. Then Marcus leaned forward and cleared his throat. "Dad, there's actually something we wanted to run by you," he said. "About the business." He reached down beside the couch and produced a manila folder thick with papers, the edges slightly worn as though it had been handled many times before today. He set it on the coffee table between us and pushed it toward me with 2 fingers, the gesture of a man who has practiced the motion and is hoping it looks offhand. "We've been looking at expanding the landscaping operation," Marcus said. "There's a commercial contract opportunity that could really change things for us. We just need some help with the financing piece." I picked up the folder and opened it. I am a slow reader by habit and a thorough one by training, and I read every page the way I have always read documents that matter, starting from the back where the details that people hope you will not reach tend to live. The loan application was for $180,000 through a commercial lending institution based in Dublin, Ohio. The stated purpose was business expansion. The terms were laid out on page 2 in the careful language of documents designed to be signed rather than understood. On page 3, the collateral section. On page 4, the guarantor section. That was where my name appeared, not as a co-applicant, not as a reference, as the guarantor, the individual legally responsible for the full repayment of the loan in the event that the primary borrower defaulted. In American lending law, a guarantor assumes complete financial liability. If Marcus missed payments, if the business failed, if the commercial contract fell through, the $180,000 would become my debt entirely. My savings, my house on Dunmore Street, my retirement. All of it would become collateral against a loan I had not requested for a business I did not own, to fund an expansion I had not been consulted about until this moment. I read the guarantor section twice. Then I read it a third time. I set the folder down on the coffee table and looked at Marcus. "Did you read this carefully before you brought it to me?" Marcus's knee stopped moving. "We went through it with the lender," he said. "That's not what I asked," I said. Serena leaned forward, her voice dropping into the register she uses when she wants to sound reasonable. "Ray, it's really just a formality. The business is solid, the contract is essentially confirmed, and we would never let anything fall back on you. This is just how commercial lending works. They want someone established behind the application." I looked at her. "What Serena is describing," I said carefully, "is called a personal guarantee. Under Ohio law and federal lending regulations, a guarantor is not a formality. A guarantor is the last line of repayment. If Marcus cannot pay, the lender comes to me. Not to Marcus first, not to the business assets, first to me directly for the full amount." Serena's expression flickered. "Just briefly, just at the corners," Marcus said, and his voice had shifted into something younger and more uncertain. "We wouldn't let it get to that point." "You may not have a choice about what point it gets to," I said. "That's what a guarantee means. It removes your choice from the equation." I closed the folder and held it in my hands for a moment. The store-bought cookies sat untouched on their tray. The good mugs steamed quietly. Outside on Kettering Drive, a neighbor's leaf blower started up and then mercifully stopped. "I want to take this home and read it properly," I said. I stood up, folder in hand. Serena stood too, her hands clasped in front of her, her composure reassembling itself with impressive speed. "Of course," she said warmly. "Take all the time you need. We just want you to feel comfortable." Marcus walked me to my truck. He put his hand briefly on my arm before I opened the door, and when I looked at him, his face had the expression of a man who wanted to say something true and could not locate the words for it. "Dad," he said, I want you to know this was—" He stopped. Started again. "I hope you know I wouldn't want anything bad to happen to you. From any of this." I looked at my son for a long moment. At the face I had known for 40 years, the face that still carried somewhere underneath the adult architecture of it, the boy who had hidden his report card in his backpack and waited 3 days to hand it over. I know you don't want bad things to happen, I said. Wanting and preventing are different skills, Marcus. I got in the truck and pulled away from the curb. In the rearview mirror, Marcus stood at the end of his driveway with his hands in his pockets, watching me go. And as I turned the corner onto the main road through my open window came the faint sound of Serena's voice from inside the house, too far to make out the words, but close enough to recognize the tone. She was already moving on to whatever came next. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon, while I was in the preparation room at Hargrove reviewing the documentation for a service scheduled that Friday. The number on my phone was local but unfamiliar, and I answered the way I always answer unfamiliar numbers, with my name and nothing else. Ray Caldwell, I said. Mr. Caldwell. Hey, this is Kevin Aldridge. Marcus's business partner, well, potential partner, I guess you'd say. We haven't actually met in person, but Marcus has talked about you quite a bit. The voice was the voice of a man who sells things warm, forward-leaning, accustomed to filling silence before it becomes uncomfortable. I just wanted to touch base about the timeline on the financing. Marcus said you were getting close to finalizing things on your end, so I wanted to make sure we're all lined up before the lender's deadline. I set down the document I had been reviewing and gave the phone my full attention. What deadline is that? I said. A brief pause. The commercial lending application, Kevin said. For the expansion, Marcus said you'd signed off on the guarantee paperwork, and it was basically just a matter of processing. Another pause, shorter this time, the pause of a man who has just heard something in a silence that concerns him. Did I catch you at a bad time? No, I said. Tell me what Marcus told you, Kevin. Exactly. Kevin Aldridge, to his credit, was not a dishonest man. He was a man who had been handed a story and had seen no reason to question it, because the story had been delivered with the kind of confidence that discourages questions. He told me that Marcus and Serena had assured him twice that Ray Caldwell, your father-in-law, the one with the federal background, very solid guy, had reviewed the loan documents, was fully on board, and had already communicated his commitment to the lender. Kevin had told 2 other potential vendors the same thing, because Marcus had encouraged him to begin preliminary conversations based on the assumption that the financing was settled. I see, I said. Is there a problem? Kevin asked. His voice had lost some of its forward momentum. There's no problem on my end, I said carefully. I just encourage you not to make any further commitments based on what you've been told about my involvement until you hear directly from me. Not from Marcus. Not from Serena. From me. The silence on Kevin's end lasted long enough to tell me he understood that something was not right, and that he was beginning to recalculate the reliability of everything he had been told over the past several weeks. Okay, he said quietly. Yeah, okay. After I hung up, I stood in the preparation room for a moment, with my hand still on the phone. The fluorescent light hummed above me, steady and indifferent. I thought about the 2 vendors Kevin had mentioned, the preliminary conversations that had already happened, the commitments that had been made in the landscape of a fiction that Marcus and Serena had built and furnished and populated before I had agreed to set foot inside it. They had not been asking me for help. They had been building a record of a decision I had not made, so that by the time I was presented with the actual documents, the weight of everything that had already been set in motion would make refusal feel like disruption rather than self-protection. I drove to Dot's house after my shift ended. She answered the door in her gardening clothes, dirt on her knees, a trowel in her right hand, and one look at my face brought her immediately inside. Sit down, she said, filling the kettle without asking. Tell me. I told her about Kevin Aldridge, about the vendors, about the story that had been circulating in the world beyond my kitchen table. The story in which I had already agreed, already committed, already become the financial foundation of an enterprise I had never consented to support. Dot set a mug of tea in front of me and sat down across the table and pressed her lips together in the way she does when she is angry and choosing her words carefully. Ray. She said, I talked to Helen Henderson yesterday. Helen said Serena came back to her last week. Not to ask for more money, just to mention that you had been grateful for Helen's help, that you had specifically said it meant a lot to you. Dot's jaw tightened. Serena is building a paper trail of goodwill, making it look like you endorsed what she did. The weight of that settled over the kitchen table between us like weather. She's not just borrowing money in my name, I said. She's constructing a version of me, a version that agreed, that was grateful, that encouraged people to participate. I wrapped both hands around the mug. That version doesn't exist. But if enough people believe it does, it starts to function like the truth. Dot reached across and put her hand over mine, her grip firm and immediate. What do you need, Ray? What, right now? I said. I need you to tell Helen Henderson the truth. Quietly, without drama. Tell her I never asked Serena to approach her. Tell her she does not owe anyone anything, and that if Serena contacts her again, to let you know immediately. I looked at Dot steadily. Can you do that? I'll call her tonight, Dot said. Her voice carried the particular steadiness of a woman who has been useful to people she loves for 68 years and has no intention of stopping. Paul Greer, too, I said. Paul, too, she agreed. I finished the tea and drove home in the early October dark, the kind of dark that arrives suddenly now, that the days have shortened, catching you mid-afternoon, when you still feel like you have hours left. The neighborhood was quiet on Dunmore Street. My house sat exactly as I had left it, lights off, rose bushes dormant, the mailbox at the end of the front walk, standing straight and patient. Inside, I opened my notebook to the page where I had written the single line about Marcus and turned to the next clean page. I wrote the date. Then I wrote a new heading in the careful block letters I had used for case files for 35 years. Scope of operation. Beneath it, I began to list everything I now knew had been set in motion without my knowledge or consent. The loan application. Kevin Aldridge. The two unnamed vendors. Helen Henderson. Paul Greer. Dot. The story of gratitude Serena had begun seeding into the neighborhood to retroactively legitimize what she had already done. When I finished the list, I looked at it for a long time. Then I wrote one line beneath it, underlined twice. She is not asking. She is building. I closed the notebook and sat in the quiet of my kitchen and thought about the cabinet key in my jacket pocket and the tools inside it. And I thought about how much patience a man needs to do the work correctly. And I reminded myself that I had never once in 35 years moved before I was ready. I was not ready yet, but I was close. I have a rule about phone calls from financial institutions. I return them immediately, and I take notes. It is a habit formed over decades of work, in which the difference between acting on information promptly and setting it aside for later was sometimes the difference between a case that held and a case that collapsed. Old habits do not retire just because the man who carries them has. The call came on a Thursday morning while I was eating breakfast. 2 eggs, wheat toast, the same breakfast I have eaten 5 days a week for the better part of 20 years. The number on my screen was the main branch line of First Central Bank of Ohio, and I answered before the second ring. The representative identified herself as Patricia from the Account Security Department. She spoke with the measured calm of someone trained to deliver unsettling information without causing panic. She told me that earlier in the week, First Central had received an unusual account inquiry submitted through a third-party request channel. Not through my online banking portal, not through a branch visit, but through an external documentation request form typically used by attorneys or financial planners acting on behalf of account holders. The inquiry had requested a full account summary transaction history for the previous 24 months and current balance verification. It had been submitted using my personal information and account details through a third-party request channel, but it failed the bank's required identity verification process and secondary authorization checks. Under federal financial privacy law, specifically, the protections established by the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, which requires financial institutions to protect customers' personal financial information from unauthorized disclosure. First Central had flagged the request rather than processed it and was now notifying me as the account holder. "Did you authorize anyone to request this information on your behalf?" Patricia asked. "No," I said. "I did not." "Would you like to place a security flag on your account that would require in-person verification for any future requests related to account information or changes?" "Yes," I said. "Do that today." I wrote down everything Patricia told me: the date the request was submitted, the channel through which it had arrived, the specific categories of information that had been requested. When the call ended, I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook open and my eggs going cold and read back what I had written. Transaction history for 24 months. Current balance verification. Full account summary. This was not the action of someone trying to understand roughly how much money I had. The dinner conversation, the number Serena had floated across the table that had been reconnaissance and estimate built from whatever Marcus had seen in my mail. This was different. This felt like preparation. Someone had wanted the precise documented record of everything I held at First Central Bank of Ohio, presented in a format that could potentially support a financial application, legal request, or future claim. I still did not know exactly who was behind it, but the pattern was becoming harder to ignore. I thought about the life insurance policy I had held for 19 years through Meridian National. $280,000 payable upon my death to the beneficiary listed on the original policy. Carol's name, which I had never updated after she passed, because updating it had felt in the years immediately following her death like a task that belonged to a future I was not yet ready to inhabit. I had meant to update it. I had not. I called Meridian National from my truck in the Hargrove parking lot that afternoon. The customer service representative confirmed what I had begun to suspect before I finished dialing. 3 weeks earlier, someone had called Meridian's policyholder services line and inquired about the process for updating beneficiary designations on an existing policy. They had provided my policy number and my date of birth. They had not completed the change. Meridian requires a signed, notarized form submitted by the policyholder directly, but they had requested that the change forms be mailed to an address that was not my address on Dunmore Street. The address they had given was on Kettering Drive. I sat in my truck and looked at that information in my notebook for a long time. The afternoon had turned gray and damp, the kind of October afternoon that cannot decide whether to rain or simply threaten it indefinitely. Leaves moved across the parking lot in small, directionless groups, pushed by a wind that had not yet settled on a direction. $280,000. $180,000 loan guarantee. $340,000 in savings. $520,000 house paid in full. I added those numbers together in my head, the way I have always added numbers quickly without a calculator, because numbers have always been the clearest language I know. The total sat in my chest like a stone. $1,320,000. That was what I was worth on paper, to someone who was thinking about me in terms of what I contained rather than who I was. I called Owen from the parking lot. He picked up on the first ring. "I need an hour tonight," I said. After close. I'll be here, he said. That evening I spread everything across the folding table in the back room. The notebook, the bank security flag, confirmation, the Meridian National. Notes the copy I had made of the loan guarantee documents. Owen sat across from me and read through each item without rushing, his reading glasses low on his nose. His expression the careful neutral of a man processing information before forming a conclusion. When he finished, he took his glasses off and set them on the table. They went after the insurance policy, he said. It was not a question. They requested the change forms, I said. They didn't complete it. Meridian requires notarized documentation from the policyholder. They hit a wall. Owen rubbed the bridge of his nose with 2 fingers. So they know they can't get to the insurance policy without your signature, he said. Which means the loan guarantee is the softest target. Get you to sign that, and they have your savings and the house as collateral without needing anything else. That's how I read it, I said. Owen looked at the spread of documents on the table between us. Ray, he said slowly. Whoever put this together, this wasn't built in a week. The bank inquiry, the insurance policy, the loan paperwork, the neighbors, this was assembled over time. Somebody planned this carefully. Yes, I said. That changes what you're dealing with, he said. This isn't opportunism. This is a campaign. The word landed on the table between us and stayed there. Outside on Clement Avenue, a truck moved past, its headlights sweeping briefly across the frosted window glass. The coffee in my mug had gone completely cold. I know, I said, which is why I need to see every piece of it before I move. Not most of it, all of it. Owen looked at me across the table. Then we keep going, he said simply. I gathered the documents back into their folder. On the cover, I wrote 2 words in the block letters I had used for 35 years to label the files that mattered most. Still building. Marcus called ahead this time, which was unusual enough to register. He called Sunday evening and asked if he could come by Monday morning just to talk, just the 2 of them. He said Serena had a work thing. He said it the way people mention details they want you to accept, without examining too closely, quickly, and in passing, as though the detail is merely logistical rather than deliberately chosen. I told him Monday morning was fine. He arrived at 9 o'clock, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the Dutch Bros on Henderson Road, the kind of gesture that is meant to establish goodwill before the conversation begins. I accepted the cup and led him into the living room, and we sat across from each other in the 2 chairs by the front window, the ones Carol had picked out from the furniture store on Fifth Avenue. The year we moved into the house, the ones I have never once considered replacing, because some things earn their place by simply being present long enough. Marcus looked tired. Not the tired of a man who has not slept, but the tired of a man who has been carrying something heavy and is hoping to set part of it down today. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup and looked at it for a moment before he spoke. Dad, I've been thinking a lot about the future, he said. Your future. I know that sounds... I know it might come across wrong, but You're 65 and I want to make sure that if anything ever happened, there'd be someone who could step in and handle things. Make decisions. Take care of the details. I kept my expression the same temperature it had been since he walked in. What kind of details? I said. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and produced a folded set of papers. He unfolded them with both hands and leaned forward to set them on the coffee table between us, smoothing the crease with his palm the way you smooth something you want to look less deliberate than it is. The document was approximately 12 pages printed on standard white paper, the header reading "Durable Power of Attorney" in bold capital letters across the top of the first page. It's just a standard form, Marcus said. Serena found a template online. It basically just says that if you're ever incapacitated, like medically, if something happened, I would be able to handle your affairs. Pay bills, deal with the bank, make sure things don't fall through the cracks. It's what responsible families do, Dad. We should have had this years ago. I picked up the document. In American law, a durable power of attorney is one of the most significant legal instruments a person can sign. Unlike a standard power of attorney, which becomes void if the signer loses mental capacity, a durable power of attorney remains in effect precisely in those circumstances, meaning the designated agent retains full legal authority to manage the grantor's financial affairs, sign contracts, access bank accounts, buy or sell property, and make binding legal decisions even when the grantor cannot object or intervene. It is not a form. It is not a formality. It is the transfer of legal personhood over financial matters to another individual. I read from the back as always. Pages 1 through 3 were standard language, the boilerplate that appears in most POA templates available online. Page 4 was where the document changed character. Tucked inside a subsection titled Additional Provisions, in a font 2 points smaller than the surrounding text, was a clause that expanded the definition of incapacity beyond the medical standard used in the preceding pages. The clause defined incapacity to include situations in which the grantor was, in the language of the document, unable to effectively manage personal financial affairs due to age-related cognitive changes as determined by the agent. As determined by the agent. Not by a physician, not by a court, not by an independent evaluator. By Marcus himself. I read that clause 4 times. Each time the meaning was the same. If I signed this document, Marcus would have the legal authority to declare me financially incapacitated based on his own judgment with no external verification required. And from that moment forward, he could access every account, every asset, every instrument in my name without my participation or consent. I set the document down on the coffee table. I picked up my coffee and took a long, slow sip. Marcus was watching me with the expression of a man who has memorized a script and is waiting for his cue. "Marcus," I said, setting the cup down carefully, "do you know what this clause on page 4 actually means?" He shifted in his chair. "It's just standard language, Dad. The template—" "It is not standard language," I said. My voice was even and unhurried, and I kept it that way deliberately because the version of this conversation that served no one was the one where I raised it. Page 4 gives you the authority to determine on your own, without a doctor or a judge or any outside party, that I am no longer capable of managing my own finances. Once you make that determination, this document gives you full legal control over everything I own. Marcus's face did something complicated. His jaw tightened, and his eyes moved to the window and then back to the document on the table. And I watched him process the gap between what he had been told this paper said and what it actually said. And I could not tell from watching whether the gap surprised him or whether he was simply recalibrating how to continue. "Dad, that's not. We would never use it that way. That's not what it's for." "What is it for, Marcus?" He opened his mouth, closed it. His hands tightened around the coffee cup until his knuckles pushed pale against his skin and his leg began its nervous rhythm against the chair cushion. And for a moment, he looked so much like the boy who had stood in my kitchen at 12 years old, confessing to a broken window, that I felt something pull sharply in the center of my chest. But I did not move from where I sat. "I'm going to hold on to this," I said. I folded the document and set it beside me on the chair cushion, out of his reach, without making a production of the gesture. "I want to read it properly." Marcus stood up. His coffee was barely touched. He picked it up anyway, held it against his chest, like something to hold on to, and walked toward the front door with the careful steps of a man who is trying to exit a room without appearing to flee it. At the door, he turned back. His eyes were bright in a way that had nothing to do with happiness. The brightness of a man pressing hard against something he cannot quite bring himself to say. "Dad," he said, his voice dropping low and cracking slightly at the edges. "I just want to make sure you're taken care of. That's all this is." I looked at my son standing in my doorway, holding a coffee he had not drunk in a coat he had not taken off on a Monday morning, when his wife supposedly had a work thing that had conveniently left him free to deliver a 12-page legal document alone. "I know you want things to be taken care of, Marcus," I said. "So do I." After the door closed, I sat in Carol's chair by the front window and held the folded document in both hands and listened to his car back out of the driveway and move away down Dunmore Street. Then I took my phone from my pocket and photographed every page of the document beginning with page 4 and saved them to the folder I had labeled simply Truth. Wednesday evenings have been mine for 11 years. Not in any dramatic or declared way. I never announced to anyone that Wednesday was my evening, never wrote it in a calendar or made it into a ritual with rules. It simply became that way, the way certain things become certain ways after enough time passes. After Carol died and the house grew quiet and the weeks started to blur at the edges, Wednesday evening became the one fixed point I gave myself. The Rosewood Grill on Carmichael Avenue, a booth in the back corner, a bowl of clam chowder and whatever was on the specials board, the local paper if I had not already read it. 2 hours of being a man sitting alone in a warm room without any obligation to be anything else. I had been going there long enough that Janet, the Wednesday evening server, knew to bring the chowder without being asked, and to leave the check only when I reached for my jacket. She is a practical woman who understands that some customers want conversation and some want simply to be present somewhere that is not home, and she has never once confused the two. I have always appreciated that about her. I arrived at 6:15 on a Wednesday in the middle of November and took my usual booth and ordered my usual chowder and opened the paper to the local news section. The restaurant was about half full, the comfortable midweek hum of a neighborhood place that has been in the same location long enough to feel like furniture. I was reading about a proposed rezoning on the east side of Columbus when I heard Marcus's voice from somewhere behind my left shoulder. He was at a table in the middle of the room. Not a booth, a round table with 4 chairs occupied by 3 men who had the look of people in their late 30s who work together and are pretending this is a social occasion rather than a continuation of the workday. Marcus had his jacket off his sleeves rolled to the elbow, a glass of beer in front of him. He was leaning back in his chair with the relaxed posture of a man performing comfort for an audience. I did not stand up. I did not announce myself. I folded the paper slowly and set it on the table beside the chowder bowl, and sat very still, the way I learned to sit still in rooms where I needed to hear clearly without being seen to listen. "The thing about my dad," Marcus was saying, and his voice carried easily across the half-empty restaurant with the unself-conscious volume of a man who believes himself to be among friends, "is that he's always been kind of, I don't know, stuck. You know what I mean? He spent 30 years doing basically custodial work for a federal contractor, and now he's at a funeral home doing the same thing. He's 65 and he's still showing up to clean up after people." One of the other men said something I did not catch. Marcus laughed. "Exactly," Marcus said. "And the thing is, he's got money sitting there, decent money actually, and he doesn't do anything with it. Doesn't travel, doesn't invest, just sits on it like it's going to hatch." Another laugh from the table. "Serena keeps saying we need to help him understand that money is supposed to work for people, not the other way around. He's old school, set in his ways. You know the type. The clam chowder in front of me was very good. Janet had brought it with a small packet of oyster crackers on the side, the way she always did, and the steam coming off it smelled like butter and salt and the particular comfort of a Wednesday evening that was supposed to be simple and was no longer simple at all. I did not move. He acts like we're trying to take something from him. Marcus continued, his voice carrying the aggrieved tone of a man who has been telling himself a story long enough to believe it completely. We're trying to help him. We're trying to make sure that when he can't, when things change, when he needs people around him, that there's a structure in place. That's not taking. That's planning. One of his companions said something about family being complicated. Marcus agreed with feeling. I reached into my jacket pocket and took out my wallet. I counted out the cost of the chowder plus a 20% tip and set the bills on the table beside the bowl. I put my wallet back in my pocket. I folded the newspaper. I put on my jacket one sleeve at a time, taking care not to allow the fabric to make any sound against the booth. Then I stood up and walked toward the side exit, the one that runs along the far wall past the wait station and out through the hallway beside the restrooms. It does not pass the center of the dining room. It does not pass Marcus's table. I walked at the pace of a man who has finished his meal and is in no particular hurry, nodding once to Janet as I passed the wait station, and I pushed open the side door and stepped out into the cold November air of the parking lot on the east side of the building. I sat in my truck for a long time. The engine was off. The parking lot was lit by two overhead lights that buzzed faintly in the cold. Somewhere on Carmichael Avenue, a traffic signal cycled through its colors for no one in particular. I put both hands flat on the steering wheel and pressed them there and felt the cold of the leather against my palms. And I breathed in and breathed out and let the evening sit around me the way cold air sits completely without gaps. He's got money sitting there. Doesn't do anything with it. Old school, set in his ways. When he can't. When things change. I have interviewed over the course of 35 years many people who were guilty of things they did not fully understand they were guilty of. People who had constructed justifications so elaborate and so frequently rehearsed that the justifications had become indistinguishable from belief. Marcus had just described stealing from his father as helping him plan for the future, and he had done it in a restaurant on a Wednesday evening with the easy fluency of a man who had said the same words many times before in private until they felt true. I started the engine. The drive home on Carmichael Avenue took 9 minutes. I did not take the long way. I pulled into the driveway and went inside and hung my jacket on the hook by the door and sat at the kitchen table in the dark for a moment. Before I reached over and turned on the lamp, I opened the notebook. I found the page where I had drawn a line through the question, Marcus accomplice or just weak? And I looked at that crossed-out line for a long moment. Then I turned to the next clean page. I wrote one word. Enough. Then I picked up my pen again, and beneath that word I began for the first time to write not observations, but actions. Not what I had seen. What I was going to do about it. Thanksgiving morning arrived the way it always does in central Ohio, gray and cold, and smelling of wood smoke from the neighbors who had started their fireplaces the night before. I was up before 6, which is not unusual for me. I made coffee in the kitchen and stood at the window and watched the light come up slow and flat over the back fence and Carol's dormant rose bushes and the empty bird feeder I kept forgetting to refill. I had not been invited to Marcus and Serena's house for Thanksgiving. I want to be precise about that, because precision matters to me, and because the imprecise version of that sentence, the one where I tell myself, I simply was not sure about the plans, or that wires got crossed, or that it was an oversight, would be a kindness I no longer felt I owed myself. I had not been invited. No call had come. No text. Nothing. And I had not called either, because calling to ask whether your own son wants you at his Thanksgiving table is the kind of question that contains its own answer. And I had spent enough of my life asking questions I already knew the answers to in professional contexts, without doing it in personal ones as well. I made eggs. I made toast. I ate at the kitchen table with the radio on low, a classical station out of Columbus that plays without commentary on holiday mornings, just music moving through the house the way light moves, filling the space without drawing attention to itself. It was fine. I have eaten alone on holidays before. The first Thanksgiving after Carol passed, I ate a turkey sandwich standing at the counter because I could not bring myself to set the table for one, and this was better than that. Most things are better than that first year. By mid-morning, I had cleaned the kitchen and read most of the newspaper and was sitting in the chair by the front window with a second cup of coffee when my phone buzzed on the side table. A notification from the social media application Marcus uses, the one Dot had shown me how to check, because she said it was the easiest way to know what was happening in people's lives without having to ask them directly. I opened it. The post had been uploaded 40 minutes earlier. A photograph taken in Marcus and Serena's dining room, the long table fully set with the good dishes and autumn centerpieces, and candles burning at each end. Around the table sat 11 people: Serena's parents, her sister and brother-in-law, 3 people I did not recognize, 2 children young enough to still find candles exciting, and Marcus at the head of the table with his arm around Serena's shoulders and a smile I had not seen on his face in years. The caption read, "Grateful for this beautiful family. Blessed beyond measure." I counted the people in the photograph twice. I did this not because I had miscounted the first time, but because I needed something mechanical to do with my hands and my eyes while the rest of me processed what I was looking at. 11 people at that table. Not one of them was me. There was no empty chair where a place might have been set and then not used. There was no gap. The table had been set for exactly the number of people who had been invited, and that number did not include me. I set the phone face down on the side table. I sat with both hands around my coffee cup and looked out the front window at Dunmore Street, which was quiet, the way streets are quiet on Thanksgiving morning, everyone already where they were going to be. A minivan moved slowly past, probably relatives arriving somewhere. A dog ran briefly across someone's lawn. The gray sky had not changed. My phone rang 15 minutes later. Dot. Ray. Her voice was tight in the way it gets when she is angry on behalf of someone she loves. I just saw it. I know, I said. That is Ray. That is a terrible thing to do to a person. It is what it is, Dot. Don't you do that, she said, her voice cracking sharp and immediate. Don't you minimize it. You are his father. You are 65 years old, and you built a life for that man, and you are sitting alone on Thanksgiving morning because his wife decided you were not useful enough to include at her table, and that is not something you get to just fold up and put away, like it doesn't matter. Her voice broke on the last 3 words, and the breaking of it hit me somewhere below the sternum with a force I had not been prepared for. I pressed my free hand flat against the kitchen counter to steady myself and breathed in through my nose and out slowly. Dot, I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended. Do you want to come over? I have a chicken in the refrigerator. Nothing special, just a chicken. A pause. Then, give me 20 minutes, she said. She arrived in 22 minutes, with a covered dish of sweet potato casserole she had made for her own small Thanksgiving, and a bottle of sparkling cider and red around her eyes that she did not mention, and neither did I. We cooked the chicken together, her managing the oven temperature, with the authority of a woman who has been feeding people for 40 years, and me peeling potatoes at the sink. The kitchen filled with warmth and the smell of roasting meat, and the small, ordinary sounds of two people moving around each other in a space they know well enough to share. We ate at the kitchen table, not the dining room. The kitchen where the table is smaller and the light is warmer and everything feels closer to the ground. At some point during the meal, Dot put her fork down and looked at me directly. "How long has it been this bad?" she asked. I thought about how to answer that honestly. "Since September," I said. "Maybe longer. I think some of it was building before September, and I just wasn't looking at it straight." She nodded slowly. "And now you are." "Now I am," I said. She picked her fork back up. "Good," she said simply. "It's about time." After dinner, I drove slowly past Marcus's house on my way home. I did not plan to. The route simply carried me there the way familiar routes do when your hands know the way better than your intentions do. The house was lit from inside warm yellow light behind the curtains, and I could hear through my cracked window the faint sound of voices and laughter carried on the cold November air. I drove past without stopping. At home, I opened the notebook to the page that said enough and read it once. Then I turned to the action page beneath it and picked up my pen and wrote a single-line addition at the bottom. Starting tomorrow. Marcus called on a Tuesday morning in the first week of December, 3 days after I had begun moving through the action items in my notebook, with the methodical patience of a man who has waited long enough and has no intention of rushing now that he has started. He said he had found some of my things while doing a clean-out of the spare room boxes I had left there years ago when Carol and I had helped them move in and never retrieved. He said I should come by and collect them before they got donated. He said it casually. He said it the way people say things they want to sound casual, which is always slightly more casual than casual actually sounds. I said I would come by that afternoon. The spare room at Marcus and Serena's house on Kettering Drive had been for the first 2 years, after they moved in, simply a spare room, the kind of undecided space that accumulates boxes and exercise equipment and the overflow of two lives merging. Carol and I had used the closet there to store a few things during a period when we were having work done on the Dunmore Street house, and some of those things had simply stayed the way objects stay in places when no one has a pressing reason to move them. One of those things was a wooden box, roughly the size of a shoebox, made from cherry wood, that Carol's father had built for her the year she turned 30. She had kept it on the dresser in our bedroom for 22 years. After she passed, I had moved it to that closet because I could not look at it every morning, and I could not bring myself to put it in storage, and the spare room at Marcus's house had felt at the time like a middle ground between keeping and letting go. Inside the box were things I will not inventory completely, because some things do not need to be listed to be understood. A photograph from our wedding, the one where Carol is laughing at something just outside the frame. A small silver ring she wore on her right hand before her fingers swelled in the last years, and she could no longer get it on. A bundle of letters tied with kitchen twine, the letters I had written her during the years when my work took me away for long stretches, and letters were the only private communication we trusted. A folded program from the first concert we attended, together a chamber music series at the Ohio Theater in 1987. Things that have no monetary value and no meaning to anyone alive except me. And at the very bottom of the box, beneath everything else, a small black USB drive, no larger than my thumbnail, which I had placed there myself 7 years ago when I was reorganizing the files from my working years and needed somewhere permanent and undisturbed to keep the master copies of every financial document I had accumulated, account records, property deeds, insurance policies, the original trust documents from Carol's small estate tax returns going back 20 years. I had put it there because it was the one place in the world I was certain no one would look. Serena met me at the door. She was wearing a weekend outfit, jeans and a gray pullover, and her expression carried the particular arrangement of someone who has prepared for a conversation and is hoping it goes the way they prepared for. She led me through the house to the spare room, talking about the weather, about how December had come on fast this year, about a recipe she had been meaning to try. The spare room had been cleared. Not reorganized, cleared. The boxes that had occupied the far wall were gone. The closet door stood open, and the closet was empty except for a row of plastic hangers and a single cardboard box sitting on the floor, which Serena gestured toward with an open hand. "That's yours," she said. We went through the other stuff, and most of it was just junk, honestly. Old magazines, broken things. We donated what we could. I walked to the closet and looked at the cardboard box. Inside were 2 paperback novels I did not recognize as mine, and a winter scarf I had not thought about in years. I picked up the scarf and set it aside and looked at the box again. "There was a wooden box," I said. "Cherry wood, about this size." I held my hands apart to show the dimensions. Serena's expression adjusted itself with the speed of long practice. "Oh, that old box, Ray, it was falling apart at one of the hinges. We thought it was just storage, old papers and stuff. We cleared it out." The temperature in my chest dropped approximately 10 degrees. "Where is it now?" I said. My voice came out level and unhurried, and I was grateful for 35 years of practice at keeping it that way. "We recycled most of it," she said. "I mean, it was just old stuff. We didn't realize it was it important?" I looked at Serena standing in the doorway of the empty closet with her hands clasped in front of her, and her face arranged into an expression of mild concern. And I thought about Carol's photograph and Carol's ring and 37 years of letters tied with kitchen twine, and I felt something move through me that I will not describe as grief because it was not grief exactly. It was older than grief. It was the particular cold fury of a man who has just been told that the last physical evidence of his best years has been disposed of by someone who called it old stuff. "Do you have the box itself?" I said. "The wooden box." Serena hesitated for 1 second too long. "I think it might be in the garage," she said. "Let me check." She came back 3 minutes later, carrying the cherry wood box with both hands. The hinge on the right side had been broken recently, I could tell by the clean edge of the split wood. The inside was empty except for a thin layer of dust, and in the bottom left corner, the small black USB drive which had slipped beneath the felt lining and was sitting against the bare wood of the base, invisible unless you tilted the box toward the light. I took the box from her hands. I ran my thumb along the broken hinge without speaking. Then I tilted the box slightly, as though checking the interior out of habit, and felt the USB drive shift against the wood. I closed my fingers around it without changing my expression or breaking the motion. "Thank you for keeping it," I said. I carried the box and the scarf to my truck. I set the box on the passenger seat. I drove to Hargrove & Sons and pulled into the parking lot and sat with the engine running and opened my right hand and looked at the USB drive sitting in my palm. It was exactly where I had put it 7 years ago. Undisturbed. Complete. I closed my fingers around it and pressed my fist briefly against my sternum hard enough to feel my own heartbeat against my knuckles. Then I took a breath that reached the bottom of my lungs for the first time in weeks. I had what I needed to begin. The back room at Hargrove & Sons at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday night is one of the quietest places I have ever known. And I have known some quiet places. The building settles into itself after hours, the way old buildings do, small sounds of wood and pipe, and the particular stillness that comes when a space designed for one purpose has been emptied of that purpose for the night. Owen had left the desk lamp on for me. One small circle of yellow light on the folding table, 2 chairs, 2 mugs of coffee he had made before I arrived, and left covered with paper towels to stay warm. He was sitting in the far chair reading a field manual he had found somewhere, the kind of government-issue document printed on paper that yellows at the edges. He looked up when I came in and set the manual aside without marking his place, which told me he had not actually been reading it. I sat down across from him and placed the USB drive on the table between us. We looked at it for a moment without speaking. It was a small thing to carry the weight it carried. I opened my laptop and inserted the drive. The folder structure that appeared on the screen was exactly as I had organized it 7 years ago, the meticulous filing system of a man who had spent decades managing case documentation and could not stop organizing information even after the cases were finished. 12 folders each labeled by category: account records, property documents, insurance policies, tax returns, estate documents from Carol's passing, investment records, correspondence with financial institutions going back to 1994. I opened the account records folder first. The files inside covered 22 years of First Central Bank statements, organized by year each file, a scanned PDF of the original paper statement. I opened the most recent year I had saved, 2017, the last year. I had updated the drive before putting it in the cherry wood box, and then opened the current year's statements, which I had downloaded from my online banking portal that afternoon and saved to my desktop for comparison. Owen pulled his chair around to my side of the table so he could see the screen without craning his neck. He had brought a yellow legal pad and a mechanical pencil, and he uncapped the pencil and held it ready without making a production of the gesture. I pulled up the financial documents Serena had presented to us on that Sunday afternoon in October, the loan application package for the $180,000 commercial expansion. I had scanned every page of that folder the night Marcus brought it home and saved those scans to my desktop as well. I opened them now in a split screen beside the USB records and began to compare. The business financial statements Marcus and Serena had included in the loan package were supposed to demonstrate the health and growth trajectory of Marcus's landscaping operation. 3 years of profit and loss statements, 2 years of balance sheets, a cash flow projection for the next 18 months. On their face, these documents described a business generating modest but consistent revenue with reasonable expenses and a credible expansion opportunity. Owen leaned forward when I reached the profit and loss statement for the previous fiscal year. "That number," he said, tapping the screen with his pencil eraser, not touching it, pointing. "The materials cost line. I had already seen it. The materials cost reported in the loan package was $43,000 for the fiscal year." I pulled up the business bank account statements that Marcus had included as supporting documentation, a different account from mine, his business operating account at Midwest Commerce Bank. The actual outflows coded to materials purchasing across the same 12-month period totaled $61,400, an $18,000 discrepancy on one line item in 1 year. I went through every line of every statement, with the same attention, Owen following alongside me with his pencil moving steadily across the legal pad, noting figures and dates and the gaps between what the loan package claimed and what the underlying bank records showed. By the time we finished the first document set, Owen had filled 4 pages of the legal pad with numbers arranged in 2 columns, the claimed figures on the left, the actual figures on the right. The business was not modestly profitable. The business was operating at a loss of approximately $34,000 annually, a loss that had been obscured through a combination of reclassified expenses, omitted liability entries, and revenue figures that included projected income from contracts not yet signed, as though they were already realized. Someone had rebuilt these financial statements from the ground up to present a picture that did not exist. Owen set his pencil down and sat back in his chair and looked at the legal pad in front of him. His jaw was tight in the way it gets when he is deciding whether to say what he is thinking. Ray, he said slowly, whoever prepared these documents knew exactly what they were doing. This isn't sloppy bookkeeping. These entries are deliberate. I know, I said. Jochenka? If a lender had processed this application without scrutiny and Marcus had defaulted, the liability would have fallen entirely on you as guarantor. You would have been repaying a loan taken out to cover losses on a business that was already failing before the application was filed. I know that too, I said. I closed the split screen and opened the insurance folder from the USB drive. Carol's original life insurance policy documentation, the property deed for Dunmore Street, with its full unencumbered title, the original beneficiary designations on my Meridian National policy. Everything was exactly as it should be, exactly as it had been before anyone had begun making phone calls to institutions asking questions on my behalf. Owen watched me work through the insurance documents and then looked at the pile of printed pages accumulating beside the laptop. "What do you need next?" he said. I reached into the cabinet I had retrieved 2 months ago from the storage room and took out the document analysis kit I had used for 3.5 decades. Magnification glass. Reference guide for handwriting comparison analysis. Portable ultraviolet light for examining paper and ink. I set these on the table beside the laptop with the deliberate care of a man unpacking tools he trusts completely. Owen looked at the kit and then looked at me. "The signatures," he said. It was not a question. "The signatures," I confirmed. I reached into the manila folder I had brought from home and withdrew the copies of the loan guarantee documents, the ones that bore my name in the guarantor section, the ones I had taken home from Marcus and Serena's house in October and examined briefly before returning to the folder. I laid them flat on the table under the desk lamp and positioned the magnification glass over the signature line at the bottom of page 7. My signature is something I know the way I know my own handwriting, which is to say I know it the way you know something you have produced thousands of times, under varying conditions, quickly, slowly, under pressure, in calm, in cold rooms and warm ones. The pressure distribution of the pen, the angle of the capital R. The way the letters connect in the middle of my last name, a slight break between the L and the W that has been there since I was 22 years old, and a supervisor told me my signature needed to be faster, and I sped it up, and the break appeared and never left. I looked at the signature on page 7 of the loan guarantee documents for a long time. The capital R was correct. The overall shape was close. But the break between the L and the W was not there. The letters ran continuously without interruption, the fluid product of someone who had practiced copying a signature from a sample but had not known to look for that particular gap, because you would only know to look for it if you had signed your own name 10,000 times and noticed the break so often it became invisible. I straightened up from the magnification glass. Owen was watching my face. "It's not mine," I said. Owen picked up his pencil and drew a single line across the bottom of the legal pad. Beneath it, he wrote 4 words and underlined them twice. Confirmed. Not his signature. I did not sleep after Owen and I finished that night. I drove home on Clement Avenue with the legal pad on the passenger seat and the document analysis kit in the back, and the particular wide-awake clarity that used to come to me at the end of long nights when a case had finally broken open, and the work of understanding had given way to the work of deciding what to do about what you understood. I made coffee at 2 in the morning and sat at the kitchen table and spread the photocopies of the loan guarantee documents flat under the good light and worked through every signature line, every initial, every dated notation that bore my name on any of the 12 pages. I worked the way I had always worked, slowly, systematically, without reaching a conclusion before the evidence had been fully examined, because the evidence does not care about your timeline and will not be hurried into meaning something it does not yet mean. By 4 in the morning, I had confirmed 3 separate instances of signature reproduction across the document set. Page 7, the guarantor agreement. Page 9, the collateral authorization. Page 11, the acknowledgement of terms. 3 signatures, all bearing the same continuous flow through the letters of my name, all missing the break between the L and the W that has lived in my handwriting since I was 22 years old. 3 signatures produced by someone who had access to a clean sample of my name, a check, a letter, a signed card, and had practiced copying it until the reproduction was close enough to pass a cursory review, but not close enough to survive the kind of examination I had spent 35 years conducting. The work of forgery, in my experience, almost always fails at the details the forger did not know to fake. I thought about Serena's voice at that first dinner in September, the way she had leaned across the table with her chin on her folded hands, and called my work morbid. I thought about the precise phrasing she had used, that she had never understood why a man of my age and situation would choose to spend his time in a place like that, around death, doing work like that. She had said it with the comfortable certainty of a woman who believed she understood exactly what kind of man she was dealing with. She had been wrong about that from the beginning, and the wrongness of her assumption had protected me in ways she could not have anticipated, because the man she believed she was managing, an aging laborer with a savings account and no particular sophistication, would not have known what to look for in these documents, would not have owned a document analysis kit, would not have been able to identify a forged signature from a reproduced sample at 2 in the morning in a kitchen in central Ohio without needing to call anyone for help. The work she had dismissed as beneath notice was precisely the work that had undone her. I gathered the documents into 2 separate stacks. The originals, or rather my copies of them, in one stack. The annotated comparison pages Owen and I had produced with the discrepancies marked and dated in another. I took out a fresh folder from the box I keep in the pantry and labeled it in the block letters I had used for 35 years on every file that mattered. I did not write evidence. That word belongs to a legal context, and I had decided sometime between midnight and 2 in the morning, while the coffee cooled beside me, that I was not going to take this to a legal context. Not yet. Possibly not ever, depending on what happened next. In American law, forgery is a felony. It carries significant criminal penalties in Ohio, up to 8 years of imprisonment, for felony forgery of financial documents under Ohio Revised Code, Section 2913. 1. If I presented what I had assembled to the Columbus Police Department, or to a federal financial crimes unit, the documentation I had compiled over the past 2 months would constitute a credible basis for investigation. A prosecutor would find it organized and persuasive. I had structured it that way by habit, but Marcus's name was on those documents too. Not as the forger, I had no evidence that Marcus had physically produced the signatures rather than Serena, but as the primary borrower, the beneficiary of the loan, the man whose business expansion the entire application had been designed to fund. An investigation would pull Marcus into its orbit regardless of what he had or had not known, and the law does not distinguish between the man who lit the match and the man who handed him the lighter and looked away. I was not ready to make that decision for my son. Not yet. What I was ready to do was ensure that every door that had been opened into my financial life was closed, locked, and reinforced before anyone could walk through it. And to do that, I needed one more thing. I needed Serena to know, without being told directly, that the man she had been building her plans around was not the man she had believed him to be. I thought about Congressman Miles Taft, who had called me twice in the past year and whom I had not returned to call because the distance between my current life and my former one felt on most days like a distance worth maintaining. I thought about the message he had left in October, saying he had business in Columbus in mid-December and would like to stop by and pay his respects to someone at Hargrove, whose family he had known for years. I had noted the visit in the appointment calendar and moved on. Mid-December. That was now. I went to the filing cabinet in my bedroom, the real one, the one I kept locked, not the one at Hargrove, and found Taft's contact card, and set it on the kitchen table beside the folder. I did not call him. It was 4:15 in the morning, and Taft was a sitting congressman, and there are limits to what professional history entitles you to. But I picked up my phone and sent him a text message. 3 sentences. I told him I had seen his message, that I was sorry for the delayed response, and that I would be at Hargrove on Thursday afternoon if he still planned to stop by. I set the phone down and looked at the folder on the table. Owen had asked me the previous night while we were packing up whether I was ready. I had told him I needed one more piece. He had nodded without asking what the piece was, because Owen understands that some parts of a plan do not benefit from being described before they happen. The piece I needed was simple. I needed Serena to see something that would make her recalculate everything she thought she knew about the man she had been so carefully, so patiently, and so thoroughly underestimating. I needed her to see me as I actually was, just once before the end of this. I closed the folder. I wrote the label in block letters on the tab. Caldwell, December 2024. Then I went to bed for 2 hours, slept without difficulty, and woke at 6:15 to the gray December light, coming through the bedroom curtains with the settled, functional calm of a man who has finished thinking and is ready to act. Thursday afternoons at Hargrove & Sons tend toward the quiet end of the spectrum. The week's services are generally scheduled for Tuesday through Thursday mornings, which means that by mid-afternoon on Thursday, the building has settled back into its between-times rhythm paperwork preparation, the administrative work that keeps a small funeral home functioning without anyone in the outside world needing to think about it. I was at my desk in the back office reviewing the following week's intake schedule when Owen knocked twice on the open door and said without particular emphasis that Serena had just pulled into the parking lot. I set down my pen. She had called that morning, which I had not expected. Her voice on the phone had carried the warmth she deploys when she wants something from a conversation before it begins, and she had said she was going to be in the neighborhood and thought she might stop by and take me to an early dinner, just the two of them, no agenda, just family catching up. I had told her I was working until 6, and she had said that was fine, she would come by around 4:30 and wait. I had not told her that Taft's message confirmed by text had said 3 o'clock. I was not certain she would come. I had made no arrangement that required her presence, had issued no invitation that could be traced back to any deliberate staging. I had simply responded to a congressman's existing plan to pay his respects at a funeral home he had reason to visit, and I had done so in the ordinary course of professional communication. Whatever happened after that would happen because the pieces were already in motion, not because I had manufactured anything. Serena came through the front entrance at 4:22. I know the time because I was watching the clock above the reception desk when the door opened, the deliberate awareness of a man who has learned that the exact sequence of events matters when events are later reviewed. She was dressed in the dark coat she wears when she wants to appear serious. Her hair pulled back, the composed, professional presentation she puts on for occasions she has decided are important. Owen met her in the foyer and brought her through to the arrangement room, the comfortable sitting room near the front of the building where we meet with families. He offered her coffee. She accepted. I joined them 2 minutes later, having taken those 2 minutes to move the Caldwell folder from my desk into the locked filing cabinet, because there was no reason to leave it visible, and every reason not to. We sat in the arrangement room and made conversation. Serena asked about the week, about whether business had been busy, the kind of questions that establish the surface of a visit without committing to any particular depth. I answered evenly and watched her eyes move around the room with the particular attentiveness of someone who is trying to understand a place by cataloging its details. Miles Taft arrived at 4:41. I heard his voice in the foyer, before I saw him, the carrying baritone of a man who has spent 20 years in rooms where being heard clearly matters. Owen was walking him back toward the family viewing area when Taft looked through the open doorway of the arrangement room and stopped. Miles Taft is 63 years old, trim in the way of men who have treated physical discipline as a professional obligation, his gray hair cut close, and his bearing the particular upright quality that never fully leaves the people who carry it long enough. He represented Ohio's 12th congressional district and had before that spent 11 years working in federal law enforcement coordination, in a capacity that had brought him into contact with my unit on 4 separate occasions over the course of a decade. He was not a close friend. He was something more specific than that, the kind of colleague whose respect means something, because it was not given easily, and has not been revised in the years since. He stepped into the doorway of the arrangement room, and his face opened into the genuine expression of a man unexpectedly encountering someone he is glad to see. "Ray Caldwell," he said. He crossed the room in 4 strides and took my hand in both of his, the grip firm and sustained the handshake of a man communicating something beyond greeting. "I was hoping I'd run into you. I should have called ahead properly instead of just sending a message." "Miles," I said. "Good to see you." He kept hold of my hand for a moment and looked at me with the directness of someone who spent his working years reading people for a living and never stopped doing it in retirement from that particular habit. "You look well," he said, "considering everything." He said it the way people say things that contain a history too long to summarize in a sentence, the verbal shorthand of shared context. I turned to Serena. "This is my daughter-in-law, Serena. Serena Congressman Miles Taft. Miles and I worked together years ago." Taft turned to Serena with the polished ease of a man accustomed to social transitions and extended his hand. "Nice to meet you," he said pleasantly. "Ray was one of the best people I ever worked alongside. One of the best I've encountered, full stop." Serena shook his hand. Her grip, I noticed, was less steady than usual. Her eyes moved from Taft's face to mine and back again, with the rapid recalibrating movement of a person who has just received information that requires them to revise a calculation they believed was already complete. "What line of work did you two overlap in?" she asked. Her voice was smooth. The smoothness cost her something. I could see it in the slight tension at the corners of her jaw. Taft smiled the particular smile of a man who knows which questions to answer directly and which to let pass with good humor. "Government work," he said pleasantly. "The unglamorous kind. Ray was exceptional at it." He clapped me once on the shoulder with his free hand. "I won't keep you. I just wanted to pay my respects while I was in town. Ray, let's find a time to have dinner properly before the year is out." He moved on down the hallway with Owen, and the arrangement room was quiet again, and Serena was sitting across from me with her coffee cup held in both hands, and her eyes doing the work of a person who is thinking very fast and very carefully behind an expression arranged to show nothing. I picked up my own coffee and settled back in my chair and let the silence sit between us for exactly as long as it needed to. She was the one who spoke first. "How long did you work with him?" she asked. Her voice had lost some of its rehearsed warmth. What was underneath was cooler and more careful. "Long enough?" I said. She looked at me across the arrangement room, and I looked back at her, and I watched the specific moment when a person who has been playing a game realizes the other player has known the rules longer than she has. It moved across her face quickly, that realization, but it moved completely, leaving something different in its place. She set her coffee down and reached for her coat. "I think I'll skip dinner," she said. "I have some things to take care of." "Of course," I said. I walked her to the front door and held it open and said goodbye with the same measured courtesy I had maintained since September. And then I stood in the doorway and watched her walk across the parking lot to her car, her steps slightly faster than her usual pace, her composure reassembling itself visibly with each yard of distance she put between herself and the building. When her car had turned onto Clement Avenue, I went back inside. Owen was waiting in the hallway. "Well," he said. "Yes," I said. That night Marcus called. His voice was careful in the way it gets when Serena has asked him to make a call and given him the words to use. "Dad," he said, "who exactly is that congressman you know?" I let the question sit for one breath before I answered. "Someone who knows exactly who I am, Marcus," I said. "Get some sleep." I called Marcus on a Friday morning and asked him to meet me for coffee. Not at his house, not at mine. I named a place the Blue Spruce Cafe on Grandview Avenue, a small, independent coffee shop that has been in the same location for 16 years and has the particular quality of a place where serious conversations can be had without feeling like a performance. Booths with high backs. Enough ambient noise to provide cover without requiring you to raise your voice. Parking on the street. Marcus arrived 7 minutes late, which is not unusual for him. He came through the door in his winter coat, with his hands in his pockets, and his eyes doing a quick sweep of the room before he spotted me in the corner booth, the same visual habit I had taught him as a boy, and which he had never lost, which was one of the things about him I had always been quietly proud of, even when there was not much else to feel quiet pride about. He slid into the seat across from me and ordered a black coffee from the server without looking at the menu, and then looked at me with the expression of a man who has been preparing for a conversation and is not certain his preparation was adequate. "You said you wanted to talk," he said. "I do," I said. I had brought one item from the Caldwell folder. Not the signature analysis, not the forgery documentation, not the annotated comparison of the financial statements Owen and I had produced across 4 pages of legal pad. I had brought one document, a single printed page, the profit and loss statement from Marcus's business for the previous fiscal year, the real one reconstructed from the actual bank transaction records that had been included as supporting documentation in the loan package, and which told a story entirely different from the summary statement Serena had prepared for the lender. I set it on the table between us and turned it so it faced him. Marcus looked at it. His coffee arrived, and he did not reach for it. He looked at the numbers on the page with the focused, unwilling attention of a man reading something he already knows is true and has been hoping would not be confirmed in quite this way, in quite this place, across a table from his father on a Friday morning in December. "Where did you get this?" he said. His voice was lower than usual. "From the documentation you and Serena submitted with the loan application," I said. "The bank transaction records you included to support the financial statements. I cross-referenced them." He pressed his lips together. A muscle moved in his jaw. He picked up the coffee cup and set it down again without drinking from it, and his hands, when they returned to the table, were not steady. "The business is in worse shape than what Serena told you," I said. It was not a question. Marcus looked up at me. His eyes were bright and unhappy, the brightness of a man who has been carrying something heavy in the dark and has just had a light turned on. "It's been harder than we expected," he said. "The commercial contracts kept falling through. The equipment loans came due faster than we projected. I kept thinking we were 6 months from turning it around." He stopped. His throat moved. "Serena said if we could get the expansion capital, we could land the bigger contracts and fix everything. She said it was just a bridge." "Did you know what kind of bridge?" I said. He looked at the page between us. "She said you'd be protected." that the loan structure was set up so that even if things went sideways, it wouldn't really touch you. I let that sit between us for a moment without filling it. See, Marcus, I said, a personal guarantee means that if you default, the lender comes to me directly for the full amount, not after exhausting other options. Directly and first. There is no structure that changes that. It is the definition of the instrument. I kept my voice the same even temperature it had been since he walked in. Did Serena explain it to you that way? His jaw tightened. Something moved behind his eyes. Not anger, not yet, but the beginning of a reckoning with information he had been given selectively and had accepted without examining. I recognized the expression. I had seen it on many faces over many years, always at the moment, when a person begins to understand that the story they were told and the story that was true are not the same story. She said it was standard, he said. His voice had gone flat. She said everyone does it this way. Marcus, I said quietly, I need to ask you something, and I need you to hear it as a question and not as an accusation, because I am asking it as your father and not as anything else. I waited until his eyes came up to meet mine. Did you know about the financial statements, that the numbers had been changed from what the actual records showed? The silence that followed lasted long enough for me to count 8 slow beats of the ambient noise around us. The coffee grinder behind the counter, 2 women laughing at a table near the window, the door opening to let in a cold draft from Grandview Avenue. Marcus put both hands flat on the table. His fingers spread wide and pressed down against the wood, as though he needed something solid to push against. When he spoke, his voice cracked on the first word, and he stopped and started again. No, he said. I knew the numbers weren't great. I knew she was putting the best face on it. I didn't know she had. He stopped again. His breathing had changed, become effortful in the way breathing becomes when a person is trying to hold themselves together by main force. I didn't know she had changed them. I thought she was just presenting them optimistically. I looked at my son, sitting across from me in the corner booth of the Blue Spruce Cafe on a Friday morning, with his hands flat on the table and his face doing the difficult work of absorbing what he was absorbing, and I felt the thing in my chest that I have never been able to properly name, the particular ache of a father, watching his child face something hard, and being unable to take it from him even when the hardness has been partly of the child's own making. There is more, I said. There are things I have found that go beyond the financial statements. I am going to show you all of it in 2 days, at my house. I need you to come without Serena. Marcus raised his eyes. They were wet at the edges in a way he was working hard not to acknowledge. How much more? He said. Enough, I said. Enough that you need to see it before anyone makes another move in any direction. He nodded once. The nod of a man who has run out of prepared responses and is operating from something rawer and less managed. Sunday night, I said. 7 o'clock. Come to the house. He nodded again. He picked up the profit and loss statement and folded it once and put it in his coat pocket. The gesture of a man taking ownership of information he has been avoiding. I watched him do it and felt something shift between us. Not repaired, not resolved, but reoriented. Pointed for the first time in months in the same direction. I left the money for both coffees on the table. At the door I paused and looked back at Marcus, still sitting in the booth. His hands wrapped around the cup he had barely touched. Staring at the table with the expression of a man beginning the difficult work of seeing clearly. Marcus, I said. He looked up. Sunday, I said. Just you. Before I reveal what happens next, please comment yes below, so I know you are still here with me. And please note the story following this contains some fictional elements and may not be entirely factual. If you prefer not to listen further, feel free to turn off the video right now. They arrived together, which told me Marcus had not told Serena about our Friday conversation. I had not expected him to. Some information needs time to settle before a person knows what to do with it. I had cleared the dining room table completely. No placemats, no centerpiece, nothing. Just the dark wood surface, and in the center the blue folder labeled Caldwell, December 2024. One chair on my side, two on theirs. We sat down. I opened the folder without preamble and began placing documents on the table one at a time, each one face up, each one turned, so they could read it without reaching. The bank security notification, the Meridian National Inquiry record with the Kettering Drive address, the annotated financial statement comparison, 4 pages of figures in 2 columns showing what the loan package claimed and what the actual records showed. The photographed pages of the durable power of attorney, page 4 on top. The 3 signature pages from the loan guarantee, each one marked where the break in the handwriting should have appeared and did not. I set each document down slowly. I did not explain them as I went. I let the paper speak. Serena's composure held through the first 4 documents. On the 5th, the signature pages, her jaw tightened and her hands, which had been resting flat on the table, pulled back into her lap. Marcus reached for the financial statement comparison and studied it with the concentrated attention of a man reading something that is rearranging his understanding of the past 6 months. His breathing was audible. When he reached the bottom of the 2nd page, he set it down and turned to Serena. "The $97,000, he said. His voice was very quiet. "Serena, what is the $97,000? Serena opened her mouth, closed it. Marcus's hands pressed flat on the table, fingers spread, knuckles whitening against the wood. His voice cracked down the middle when he spoke again, splitting open on the words like something that had been held closed too long. "Tell me what the $97,000 is. I called First Central Bank at 8 o'clock the following morning. The security flag I had placed on the account in October had prevented any unauthorized access, but I wanted something more permanent. I notified the account security department that no third party had authorization to request access or modify any information associated with my accounts, effective immediately and in writing. The representative confirmed the notation within the hour. I called Meridian National next. I updated the beneficiary designation on my life insurance policy, a process requiring a signed, notarized form, which I completed at a UPS store on Henderson Road before noon. The new designated beneficiary was a charitable trust I had established years ago and never dissolved. Clean, documented, and entirely outside the reach of anyone on Kettering Drive. Called at 2 in the afternoon. I told her what had happened the previous evening, not everything, but enough. She was quiet for a moment, and then said in the voice she uses when she has made a decision that she was going to speak to Helen Henderson and Paul Greer herself and make certain they understood the full picture. I told her I appreciated that. She said she knew I did. Marcus called at 4. His voice sounded like a man who had not slept, which I suspected was accurate. "Dad," he said, "I'm sorry. I don't have words for how sorry I am." I let the apology sit for a moment before I answered. Outside my kitchen window, the December light was thin and cold and honest, the kind of light that shows everything exactly as it is. "I know you are Marcus," I said. "Apologies are the beginning of something, not the end of it. Come see me when you're ready to talk about what comes next." He said he would. I believed him. Serena came alone on the 30th. No coat adjusted, no folder, no prepared presentation. She sat across from me at the kitchen table with her hands folded in front of her, and her composure worn thin in the way composure gets when the performance has been running too long, without an audience that believes it. I had made coffee. I poured her a cup without asking because it was the right thing to do regardless of everything else, and because Carol had taught me that the small courtesies matter most precisely when everything else has broken down. "I was trying to secure something for Marcus," she said. "That was always the reason." "I know that," I said. "Wanting good things for your husband is not the problem, Serena. The problem is what you were willing to do to someone else to get there." She looked at her hands. Her jaw worked slightly, the movement of a woman who has several things to say and is deciding none of them will help her now. "I'm not going to file a report," I said. "Not because you don't deserve the consequences, but because Marcus's name is on those documents, and he has enough to carry without adding that." I let that land before I continued. "But I need you to understand something clearly. Every account is locked. Every authorization is canceled. Every document that bears my name has been reviewed and secured. There is nothing left to reach for. Not today. Not next month. Not ever." She nodded once. Her eyes were dry, and her jaw was tight, and she looked for the first time since that September dinner exactly like what she was, a woman who had run a careful, patient, well-constructed plan directly into a wall she had not seen coming, because she had never once considered that the man she was managing might know exactly what she was doing, and had simply been waiting until he understood all of it before he moved. "You underestimated me," I said. "Not with anger. Just as a fact, the way you state the weather or the time." She did not deny it. That more than anything else she had done in the past 4 months told me she was finally being honest. At the door she paused with her hand on the frame and turned back once. "If Marcus and I don't make it through this, that is between you and Marcus," I said. "I hope you do. I mean that sincerely. Whatever happened between you and me has nothing to do with what I want for my son." She left without another word. I stood in the doorway and listened to her car back out of the driveway on Dunmore Street and watched the taillights dissolve into the December dark. Then I went to the back porch. I sat in the old wooden chair with a cup of coffee and Carol's dormant rose bushes in front of me, and the Ohio night pressing cold and quiet against everything. Somewhere across the neighborhood, someone had started early fireworks, small blooms of light appearing and dissolving against the dark sky, there and then, gone the way most things are when you finally stop holding on to them too tightly. I did not feel like a man who had won something. I felt like a man who had held on to what was his through 4 months of patience and silence and the slow, careful work of understanding before acting. The distinction matters. It has always mattered. My coffee cooled in my hands. Carol's rose bushes stood dormant and patient in the dark, waiting for spring the way they always had, the way she had taught them to. The year turned. I went inside. I am not a man who talks about himself easily, but if this family story has taught me anything, it is this: the people who love you should never need to count what you own to know what you are worth. I believed for too long that staying quiet was the same as keeping peace. It is not. Silence is not peace. It is just postponed pain. Do not make my mistake. If something feels wrong inside your own family, name it early before it becomes a document on a table. God has a way of placing the right information in front of you at exactly the right moment, if you are willing to look at it honestly. My personal belief is simple dignity is not something anyone can take from you. It is only something you can surrender. I chose not to surrender mine. These grandpa stories are not easy to tell, but I believe every family story worth living is worth sharing, because somewhere out there, someone is sitting at a dinner table right now, feeling exactly what I felt in September, and they need to know they are not alone. If this grandpa story stayed with you, leave a comment below and tell me which moment hit hardest. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I mean that more than I can say. The stories ahead contain some fictional elements crafted purely to inspire and illuminate. If that is not the journey you are looking for, no hard feelings, find the story that speaks to you.